I'm Sharon Chang, and today on BizTech Conversation, we have with us Sweden's Ambassador to Malaysia, Dag Juhlin-Dannfelt. Welcome to the show, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Your Excellency, because of COVID-19, how is the situation on the ground in Sweden from a healthcare and economic standpoint?
You know, it's difficult to make any other conclusion that Sweden, as you know, most countries in the world, certainly in Europe, have been hit seriously by the pandemic, and it has had a negative effect on the economy. The second quarter 2020, the economy experienced or saw a negative growth of -8%, or the economy contracted by 8%, while it recovered in the third quarter. And I think the estimate for the whole of 2020 is economic contraction between 4% and 5%, which is obviously not good, but it could be worse. Mm-hmm. But this is not unique for Sweden. I mean, we're all hit. Sweden, as most European countries, have been hit in a harder way than in East Asia, judging by available statistics. I think we have about 600,000 confirmed cases in Sweden and nearly 12,000 dead. So it's of the 12,000 dead, I mean, 90% are above the age of 70. So it's clear which segment of the population that is most vulnerable to this pandemic. You know.
So with the vaccine rollout, do you see the economy improve soon?
Well, vaccine, there's a lot of speculation about the effects of the vaccine. Obviously, vaccination campaigns, once implemented, will have a positive effect. But there's also a lot of uncertainty, lots of question marks surrounding the vaccines. I mean, how long will the immunity be there? You know, there are several reports indicating that even after vaccination, people will still be likely to be spreaders of the virus. You know, so it's uncharted territory to a very large extent. But you know, I would definitely hope that with vaccinations being implemented on a wider scale across the world, you know, we will gradually be able to restart the economies. I will not say go back to normal, because I don't think there's going to be a back to normal. I think, you know, this pandemic is clearly linked to what is happening, you know, on a global scale when it comes to climate change or, you know, climate emergency. Most people talk about climate emergencies these days. The loss of biodiversity. You know, we've managed to reduce our nature from covering, you know, 60-70% of the planet to remaining 30%. 30% of the planet is now covered by unspoiled nature, unspoiled forest. And with nature being squeezed, with animals, with the trees, the flora being so squeezed, obviously there will be consequences. This will have far-reaching economic consequences. So this is probably just the beginning. We have to adapt to, let's call it new normal, or whatever headline one wants to use, but it's uncharted territory. Yes. And we have to adapt.
Yes, true. So, Your Excellency, what are the key sectors and the engines of growth in Sweden, actually?
I mean, key sectors, I mean, Sweden is an industrialized nation. I mean, we have very limited natural resources. We don't have oil or, you know, diamonds or gold or, you know, any high value raw material. We have iron, we have vast forests that we try to cultivate as carefully as possible in a sustainable way. But industry is the backbone. You know, traditional industry is the backbone of the Swedish economy. We have had, I mean, we're a small country, 10 million inhabitants, but I think per capita we have a rather impressive number of, I think we might even be the highest in the world, possibly competing with Switzerland. If you measure multinational companies per capita, you know, you have the Volvo, Scania, Ericsson, Alfa Laval, Tetra Pak, ABB, etc., etc. But the the real growth engine for the Swedish economy and for most economies is to have a creative, innovative business environment that allows for startups, new ideas that have to somehow live in symbiosis with the bigger companies. I mean, Ericsson, for example, in the IT sector, they depend on a whole ecosystem of small, medium-sized tech startups. And when they detect, they're always scouting for new ideas. And the key, I think, for any economy is to stimulate the growth, the coming into being of a kind of an ecosystem that fosters creative, innovative thinking. And so while you say Sweden, you think IKEA, H&M, Volvo, Ericsson, etc. But the real picture, I would say, also casts a strong light on these small and medium-sized companies, like Spotify. Who knew about Spotify just 10 years ago? Today it's a global brand. They're even listed on the New York Stock Exchange. IKEA is a retail store worldwide, leading in sustainable furniture. But IKEA in itself has a vast network of small and medium-sized companies that are putting in new ideas, including in making the business increasingly more sustainable and digital.
Your Excellency, I mean, Sweden and Malaysia's ties as trade and investment partners goes way back, right? So as you mentioned, like Swedish companies like Volvo, Ericsson, they have established in Malaysia since 1960s. So are there new opportunities or areas of cooperation with Malaysia?
There are always new areas, and it's my job as well as the job of my Malaysian colleague in Stockholm, ambassador, the Malaysian ambassador to Sweden, to Noor Ashikin, to do our best to foster continuous cooperation. I mean, yes, our commercial interaction is very much focused on the Swedish big multinationals. But I was, compared to other countries where I worked, when I took up my position 5 years ago, 4.5 years ago, I was struck by the number of small and medium-sized companies, Swedish companies, that have actually made a move to invest and establish themselves in Malaysia, and moving into new sectors, digital sectors, for example. Yesterday, I had the occasion to listen to one managing director of a small or medium-sized Swedish company called Monitor, Monitor ERP system established in Penang. And it's a small company, very agile, but providing digital solutions. And they are doing a wonderful business. I have not heard of Monitor, I'm ashamed to say, before I came to Malaysia. Okay. They are not really visible on the map. I think in the area of corporate sustainability, because that's the main, it will be the main area in the future. Corporate sustainability, how businesses can sustainability into a core business value. That the whole business chain, the whole value chain is from 0 to 100 is sustainable. Sustainable in the sense that no emissions, reducing or cutting off emissions. This is going to be the main front line of business competition in the future. And those companies who do not begin to transit into a more sustainable production mode they will not be competitive. Cheap labor is no longer the miracle cure for to make profits. Is to be sustainable, and this is what also clients, customers. This is coming more. In Europe, it's dominating. In Europe, if an audit shows that a company is considered a polluter, the shares will drop. It's the market. I think even in the United States, having experienced 4 years of a president who denied climate change, the private sector have still made a shift, and certain states like California is far ahead in transiting into making transition into a green economy. You need to be, and China is beginning. It's the big world's probably the world's biggest economy. I don't know if they're statistically overtaking the US, but they are. No, it's China is going to be the dominant player economically in the world, and China have realized since a few years, but now with President Xi Jinping coming up and declaring that China shall be a net zero emitter by 2060. I mean, China is on the track. They still have lots of coal, a lot of fossil fuels, a lot of industry based on or paying the price of its activities by heavy emissions. But it is transiting. And this is going to be also a big challenge for not only Malaysia, for ASEAN. If ASEAN wants to put itself as an attractive place for European and Chinese investments, they have to also be perceived as moving in the right direction, and the right direction is to move into gradually becoming a greener economy, and this is where I see huge potential. I'm proud to say that I'm sure we have many flaws and challenges in Sweden as well, but we are quite ahead. And judging by all these indexes that circulate, Sweden would always rank around the top 5. I think we are actually ranked for the 5th year in a row as the most sustainable economy in the world. But that's good for today, but not tomorrow. We have to remain sustainable. And at the end of the day, it is not a beauty context. At the end of the day, it is a process that we all have to enter together and work together. And this is where I see a big potential for Swedish-Malaysian engagement. This was the key topic when Sweden arranged the Sweden Southeast Asia Business Summit in Kuala Lumpur 2018. There were 2 key topics: sustainability, sustainable business, and innovation. The 2, and what is now called ESG. How to do business combined with ESG, environmental, social, good governance. This was the core topic. It was the core topic of the first Sweden Southeast Asia Business Summit in Singapore 2016, and it's going to be the core topic of the 3rd Sweden Southeast Asia Business Summit, which will take place in Singapore in May, but probably in a hybrid format. So this is where, and the aim of these business summits, it is for Southeast Asian businesses to be able to meet up with Swedish companies, but also to portray or give Swedish companies a chance to come and have a look at Southeast Asia, at Malaysia for themselves. And what they are looking for inter alia is sustainability. Is this a good place to do? If you want to, in 10 years' time, if you're not sustainable, you're going to be out of business. You'll be paying the price. Like the Swedish, I don't know if you are familiar with the story of the Swedish office equipment company Faucet. It was a world leader. They had factories all over the world, but they underestimated the shift into computerization and digitalization and didn't invest right. In a year, they were gone. They went bankrupt. This is going to happen to companies who do not enter into the process of making the shift into a greener economy. So this is the big area where I think, and there's so many, there's limitless. Take waste. I was just reading the newspaper today in New Straits Times. It's a big article by one of Malaysia's leading experts. Muhyiddin, a lady called Muhyiddin, on the need to make the shift. There was another article on waste. Malaysia must improve its ability to manage waste. In Sweden, we recycle or reuse at least 99% of our waste. In Malaysia, I think it's still far less. There's still the landfill.
Way back in that. Yes.
And there's huge potential. This is not to be viewed as something negative, as a cost necessarily. It's an opportunity, because waste is raw material. It's about good regulation and then open it up. Good regulation, but also deregulation to open up for business. I mean, it's basically the private sector that manages waste in Sweden. And increasingly in Europe. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with the EU Green Deal. It's all about making this huge shift. So there are many opportunities, and that's one of the areas that during my tenure as ambassador, and God knows I'm not a businessman, so I shouldn't really talk about good business. I'm a bureaucrat and administrator, but I try to listen carefully to what companies say and tune in, and as well as executing the orders of my government. But one of the key topics that we've been engaging on with Malaysia during my time so far has been renewable energy, waste management, circular economy, not only as Sweden, but also as the Nordics. All Nordic ambassadors, this is a strongly shared strategic goal. We don't really care if we at tactical level might be competitors. The Swedish company might compete with the Danish company. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if the Dane or the Swede or the Norwegian or the Finn wins, as long as, because it will be a step towards more sustainability. So we have a very good Nordic cooperation in this area. But there are so many areas. 5G, digitalization, cybersecurity.
Yes. So, Your Excellency, you mentioned that you as an ambassador, you're here to listen. So on the ground, what are the challenges that the Swedish businesses face operating here in Malaysia?
Of course, there are challenges. I mean, there are challenges also. If I listen to Swedish companies operating in Sweden or in Europe, they will always identify challenges, and challenges are there to be overcome. And of course, there are challenges also in Malaysia, but I think they vary very much from sector to sector, and often can be quite technical or specific. But and then at times it's there might be challenges that I would describe as my impression would be that the root is unnecessary red tape. But my experience is that once we communicate an issue to the ministry responsible, and I think MITI is extremely helpful in this regard. MIDA is very helpful. InvestKL very helpful. Problems are solved rather quickly, but overall, I think for a good business environment, there are certain basic rules that are pretty straightforward. It's transparency, it's predictability, rule of law. You want to know the rules of the playing field when you move in, and if there are alterations or unforeseen complications, that disturbs the. Of course, companies must always, and that's also part of my job, to make sure that the Swedish companies abide by the rules and regulations of Malaysia. We don't tolerate companies who are involved in corruption or doing unethical things, treating labor in an abusive way, etc. These are all parameters for good and responsible business, but we have a good dialogue, and I think in Malaysia one should also I should highlight that Malaysia there are many good business organizations that we interact with, and one that I particularly would like to mention is the ASEAN Business Advisory Council, which is in Malaysia headed by Tan Sri Dr. Munir Majid, whose pathway towards recovery and hope. I don't know if you've read this, but this is a fantastic book, fantastic document that I sent to Stockholm as a very much inspired by the work of Tan Sri Munir Majid. It's if this is if any government should follow the recommendations, and I read it. These recommendations comes from business and a part of business that is progressive, realizing the need to adapt to future challenges to remain competitive.
So, Your Excellency, so how what does the bilateral figures picture look like currently? For the past 2 years, 2019 and 2020, it always shows that it's in favor of Sweden. Is our government agency like Martrade and MIDA doing enough to promote, bilateral trade investment?
Trade statistics is a discipline in itself, and it all depends on the methodology. And I have a long-standing discussion with my Malaysian counterparts at MITI and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Wisma Putra, about the implications of state statistics. Because our trade statistics show that Malaysia has a trade surplus, that we have a trade deficit. But and this I've seen, the different countries have different systems of measuring trade, and measuring trade the methods tend to be reflective of an older age when trade was really exports from A to B. Today, in a globalized economy, it's a Swedish export might actually come from China or from South Africa or from Argentina. Because Swedish multinationals have their suppliers all spread. A Volvo car Volvo, as you mentioned, the investments in the 60s, the first car ever made in Malaysia was made by Volvo. And so on the car, rolling off the assembly line in Kuala Lumpur, it says made in Malaysia. But the components probably come from 20, 30 different countries. And not only Sweden. No, I would say the majority of the components do not even come from Sweden. They might come from different parts of the world. But it's beneficial for the Swedish economy that this car made in Malaysia is rolling off the assembly line in Malaysia. There's also the effect of trade via third parties. I mean, if you look at the statistics, Singapore is a huge trading partner with Sweden. But I mean, Singapore is a small country. There's no market for all this. Where did market? Well, obviously it's transits, and most of the transiting to Malaysia goes through Singapore. So a lot of exports from Sweden labeled to Singapore is probably exports to Malaysia. Vice versa, Malaysian exports goes through the port of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And whether it's E&E or palm oil or whatever, it would stay in the storage there for a while and then shipped on to different parts of Europe. So I think our commercial interactions are far higher than as shown by the statistics, because the sum of the statistics is more or less the same. It indicates approximately 3.2, 3.3, 3.5 billion ringgit, which is not as such not that impressive. But Malaysia is among the top 25 trading partners of Sweden. And to my mind, when I discuss this, I always put forth my own conviction that the real measurement of the level of our commercial bilateral engagement is the investments. And we have some 100 Swedish companies established in Malaysia. And then, as I said before, not only the big multinationals, also many small and medium-sized companies. And this is the core. If you measure business travelers before MCO, before the COVID time, the intensity of business travelers between Sweden and Malaysia would indicate that we have a very active commercial relationship. And even though I have to add that when it comes to investments, it is a bit of a one-way traffic. Swedish investments to Malaysia are far bigger than Malaysian investments into Sweden. I think during my time, we've managed to identify 4 Malaysian investments in Sweden, while here we're talking about double, triple-digit figures. But we have I would describe it's a healthy commercial relationship, and that will remain so. I might add, that's another hallmark of the quality of our relations is that yesterday, the Malaysian embassy in Stockholm, under the leadership of Ambassador Noor Ashikin, arranged a business seminar for Swedish businesses. I was listening in because I wanted to hear how things are presented. I was very impressed that by the high number of participants. I think there were more than 200 Swedish companies were listening in, and the focus was clock clean. It was straight on innovation, sustainability, and presenting not only Malaysia, the whole of ASEAN as a good venue for sustainable and innovative investments. the Swedish Deputy Minister of Trade attended on behalf of the government, and it was a very good discussion, and I'm very impressed by what I heard. So I will have to try to do something similar in Malaysia.
So, Your Excellency, you were mentioning Malaysian businesses investing into Sweden. So, but what are some of the strategies that Malaysian businesses need to know to advocate, better successful market entry, into Sweden?
Well, I mean, this is where I would first issue a warning that I'm not a businessman. So bureaucrats should not mingle with business, except for the commenting on the regulatory part. And I think that's Sweden's. But obviously, anyone wanting to do an investment must do their own homework. But doing the homework when it comes to due diligence in Sweden is fairly easy, because Sweden is an open economy. We don't look at the color of money. As long as it's legal money, we welcome it. So it's easy to invest. We have a vibrant startup scene with incubators or innovation hubs or accelerators. There are different names for this phenomenon. And in other countries where I worked, I know that they've arranged delegations going to Sweden just to kind of scout out the startup scene, because we don't have enough venture capital to really commercialize all the good ideas that are being sprouting out from these innovation hubs, and so there are several. I mean, the United States is one of them. China is another one. They're very active in trying to buy ideas before they have grown into businesses. So they can. I mean, you can have Saudi Arabia. I was ambassador to Saudi Arabia for 5 years. The Saudis send delegations. They can. They buy an idea, invest either in Sweden, and then bring it to Saudi Arabia, or even bringing the idea and making it to Saudi Arabia, made in Saudi Arabia suddenly. So I think this is an exciting area, or should be exciting. I know that Kazan has been looking into this, and we hope that as the Malaysian economy, which is still, I mean, Malaysian business, I think to a very large extent is Asia centric. It's focusing on China, on Japan, South Korea, on the ASEAN countries, but long-term wise, and as the Malaysian economy grows, I think Europe should be not only the UK, which is also a favorite destination for Malaysians, but it's worthwhile to take a look at not only Sweden. I'm Swedish, so of course I have, my job is to talk about Sweden, but I would say the Nordics is a very exciting business region. All the Nordics as a region, and we are very harmonized. We are very similar as Nordic countries. So if you do business in Denmark, you can do business in Sweden. It's just a bridge that you have to drive across, So I think there's an enormous potential, and there is some exciting. I should also mention some very exciting developments taking place in Sweden right now. It was highlighted at yesterday's business seminar in Stockholm, a webinar that is called an organization called Fossil Free Sweden that has initiated. It's Fossil Free Sweden is a public organization, public agency, but in cooperation with the different branch organizations of Swedish industry, they've issued 22 sector-specific roadmaps on how to move ahead to a fossil-free economy, fossil-free business, and for example, transportation sector, where we have Scania and Volvo trucks and buses, and Volvo cars, obviously. The target that is very much realizable is to by 2030 cut emissions by 70%. This is revolutionary. No other country has such a target. That is not only a paper target. It's actually happening as we speak. The first ever fossil-free steel production plant is coming into operation in Sweden, called Hybrid. By substituting coal and fossil fuel with hydrogen. This is unique. And I had the occasion to ask one of the managers of the company in question, SSAB, if this is really, can you really compete with cheaper fossil-based steel? And his answer was yes, because the demand for fossil-free products is increasing dramatically. So move ahead. I mean, look at the situation, try to predict the situation 10 years ahead. What will the demand picture look? The demand picture in 10 years ahead will probably be substantially in favor of fossil-free steel, using hydrogen. And hydrogen is like a new miracle cure. I'm not a scientist, so I cannot talk with any credibility about hydrogen. But listening to experts said this is it. And you only need water and some investments into this. But these investments will lead to increase competitiveness and productivity in the long term. Same with Northvolt, the first green battery factory, also being erected in Sweden. I mean, I think there is one in China already, but competition. But this is very exciting developments. Very exciting developments. And they are driven by industry, not by government. It's not the Swedish government that is sitting with a huge whip trying to force companies. No, companies have realized that they must be leaders in sustainability to be commercially viable.
So, Your Excellency, mounting competition from our Southeast Asian neighbors, right, especially Vietnam, do the Swedish companies still see Malaysia as a good entry point into ASEAN and also Asia as a whole?
I would say so. I mean, it's once again, one should look 10 years ahead. Take the current situation, and then look 10 years ahead. And you compare the different policies being conducted by ASEAN, individual ASEAN member states, and then draw conclusions from that. Today, yes, I would say that Malaysia is definitely still a very attractive investment destination as an entry point to Southeast Asia. For example, Volvo cars, they have their plant in Malaysia. They supply the whole ASEAN market. A challenge for intra-ASEAN trade is tariffs have gone down in accordance with the agreement on the ASEAN Economic Community, but the non-tariff measures, non-tariff barriers have increased substantially, which has been highlighted not least in this business ASEAN Advisory Council document. And I think that the eminent Malaysian think tank called CHARI, CIMB ASEAN Research Institute, has also made detailed studies on this growth of non-tariff measures. This is an impediment, and I know that MITI is taking a tough stance on this. They work hard to convince the ASEAN partners that we will all stand to benefit by creating a common market with as little friction as possible. And that is, as a parenthesis, this is the real triumphal achievement of the EU. It's not so much common security policy, but the internal market. And when I grew up, I studied partly in France. I had to get a visa and a student permit to go to France. Today, my daughters, when they want to go to France to study, they can just move across. They don't apply to a French university and they get in. It's a common internal market for trade, for goods, services, finances, and persons. And this is a real driver of growth and equality as well. Because inequality, growing inequalities is I think it's a global phenomenon. It's a challenge But no, I think if Malaysia plays its cards well, I've been in my interactions with the government, I would always make the recommendation based on what I see in Malaysia, that Malaysia has the potential to be a leader, for example, in sustainability. this is, I mean, ASEAN as a whole, I might be wrong, and it's not a qualified, but my impression is that ASEAN as a whole, with the exception of Singapore, ASEAN as a whole is a bit lagging behind when it comes to making the transition into a sustainable economy. Malaysia has the infrastructure, has the knowledge, has the competence, all the qualities, all the ingredients necessary to take a leading role. I was listening to the Thai ambassador to Stockholm yesterday at this seminar, and she made a very good presentation of what Thailand is doing now. It was news to me. I hadn't heard it, but it was very impressive. And Malaysia can what I see in Malaysia makes me a strong believer that Malaysia has the potential to become a leader, and that in itself will attract investments and businesses. Looking at this, it's called backtracking. You look ahead. What is it? 2031. What will the market? What will the and then you backtrack. What do we have to do now to get to where we want to be 2031? If you want to be a sustainable, competitive company, we have to take certain steps in consultation with government, etc. And that I think is a good way to go about it, to remain attractive as an investment destination.
Besides, removing the red tape and also be more transparent, do you think Malaysia's current political fluidity, does it hinder the inflows of investments?
It's too early to say. I mean, the state of emergency was declared invoking the pandemic. Yes. Yeah, I mean there are. I think in many countries, certainly in Europe, there are different levels of emergencies or contingency measures being in force. Like Sweden, from I think Friday evening, we will introduce a measure that we haven't done before, because for us it's a matter of principle to keep our borders open, to allow freedom of movement. But from Friday evening, we will impose a demand of negative COVID tests on all foreign citizens who want to enter Swedish territory. This is a restrictive measure. The state of emergency is said to last until the 1st of August, or might be lifted earlier depending on development of the COVID situation. The COVID situation, I think, is the pandemic. That's the real impediment to investments. So Malaysia is. I don't think. I mean, we can look at what's happening in Myanmar right now. That's very disturbing to business. You don't want that kind of disruption, major. Yes. And it also tarnishes the good name of the country. Malaysia is blessed with a very good brand name. You hear Malaysia, most people react positively and say, "Wow, Malaysia is a nice place," even if they haven't been there. Certain countries have this aura, and it's for Malaysia to cultivate that aura in a way. And political stability, of course, is a key criterion. Whether the current government would be a minority government or majority government, I mean, from a European perspective, that's not the definition of it's not really related to stability, because my country is governed by a minority government. A government that controls about 35% of the seats in parliament, but they have. Politics is the art of compromising. They have to reach out across the political front lines and make compromises. So being from a European perspective, to have an absolute majority in government isn't necessarily quite. I know you have. I don't quite understand the Westminster model, which operates according to a different logic than our proportional democracy. But I don't see. That a minority lacking a strong majority in parliament should be an impediment to good governance.
Okay. Let's see. On a lighter note, I have came across a post that you shared on your LinkedIn saying that Stockholm is one of the most creative places in the world. So what makes Stockholm's DNA different from other cities in the world? Maybe can you share a bit on that?
Well, that is a Swedish statement, possibly strongly partial. I mean, there are probably many ambassadors who would want to claim that their capitals are very competitive, but it goes back to what I was saying initially. I mean, we have this, yes, we have a number of big multinationals. The hallmark of big nationals, Swedish big multinationals is that they are very R&D intensive. They invest massive amounts into research and development to be able to renew themselves, preparing for tomorrow. You know, if you live on today's victories or layers of victory, you might underestimate tomorrow's challenge. So they invest a lot on being on the top of the technological developments, and this has also stimulated this growth of new startups, highly innovative. I've had through my years, I've had the pleasure of escorting many foreign delegations to different startup hubs. I call them incubators or innovation hubs or accelerators, and it's very impressive to see the younger. I mean, I belong to the older generation, so I don't even understand maybe more than 10% of what I hear, because this technological developments is moving ahead so fast. Fintech, for example, is I think Sweden is considered one of the leading fintech countries, and this is all the creation of. It's not Swedish banks that are doing this. These are small and medium-sized companies. We've had during my time, we've had two Swedish fintech delegations to Malaysia, and it's amazing to see these young Swedish entrepreneurs meet up with, because there's the same thing here. The same goes with health tech. I mean, AstraZeneca, a Swedish-British company, is as we speak, investing a lot in innovation hub in Malaysia. A good example of someone who sees Malaysia as a good base for regional operations. And then they target Malaysian startups and want to link Malaysian startups with Swedish startups. And there are ample of them in the digital healthcare, so digital solutions for healthcare. It's extremely, when I fall sick in Sweden, I don't go to the doctor. I will use my iPad, call up and say, look, and if the diagnosis is that you don't need to come, the doctor says, no, I will prescribe you through an e-pharmacy mechanism. I will prescribe you a mechanism that without leaving home, I can have the pharmacy delivered to me.
Yes, it's fantastic.
Yeah. And while the doctor, he will only tell me to come to the hospital if he diagnoses some severe symptoms. This can all be done. You don't need to move. This can all be done digitally. The same. I mean, Swedish businesses have in Malaysia. I was surprised when we had our first business meeting after the first MCO in May, and I expected to hear a lot of complaints, tears, people saying, oh no, our business is going down. But they were doing fine. Most of them were doing fine because they are already so digitalized that they can operate on a work from home basis. This is this creative business environment that makes Stockholm rank rather highly as a city, innovative, creative city. And I think if one measure, there are many different measures, but if one measure the number of unicorns per proportion to the size of the city, Stockholm ranks second only to Silicon Valley globally, and that's a bit of a measure.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on our show. I've been speaking to Sweden Ambassador to Malaysia, Dag Juhlin-Dannfelt. Thank you so much, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
This video will be on our Facebook and LinkedIn site, as well as on our website, www.biztech.asia. Please check out our website for business and technology conversations via articles, videos, and podcasts, and subscribe and like our Facebook and LinkedIn pages.